Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today, you guys are going to be super excited about this one because it's another one of your favorite. It's a 911. And what is it a 911 in? Well, I can tell you this much. It's not an F-150. It's a brand new Dodge Ram. What's going on, Fernando?
Hey, just dressing the car.
Getting it prepped?
Yeah, getting it prepped.
So I know what you're thinking. How could a brand new vehicle already be in for a 911? And that was kind of my thought. It's here, so let's see what's going on with it. So from the onset, just looking at the vehicle, everything is where it's supposed to be. Nothing is missing, loose, or broken as of yet that we can find. It has the factory Harman Kardon system in it with the 8-inch touchscreen. There's a box up underneath the seat, and it is covering these. We are getting rid of this box, and we're gonna go with a Fox box. This box is coming out because it sounds like poo-poo. The subs are sitting right on the carpet. I can barely get my hand up underneath here. And they are some Sundowns, which are some really nice subs. They do the surround inverted so that it takes up less room. So they do a really nice job of trying to make these as thin as possible. They're just not working in this style enclosure with it this close to the floor. If the floor mat wasn't in there, it would probably be okay. One thing to note about the box is the box came trunk liner gray. He didn't like that, so they actually vinyl dyed it. That is to say, spray painted it black. Feels really like you would paint carpet would feel. I do have one of these Dodge Rams. Located on the seat is a pull tab, so you can kind of like reach in behind and pull down. They put a zip tie on it to make it easier to unpull. What we have behind the seat is 3 DD audio amplifiers crammed in here, and the problem that immediately happens that he was complaining about is the way they mounted this amplifier. This seat slides because they mounted the amplifier right here. The seat no longer slides properly, and he's like, please fix that. The other thing too is we saw pictures of this. They actually took the whole seat out and they cleaned off a bunch of area behind here, but then they put this thick board on here and didn't allow any of the amplifiers to get countersunk into there. So that's going to be interesting to figure out what we're going to do there. One of the other things we're doing is we're going to be adding a DSP. So before we get these out, what we want to do is go up underneath the hood, disconnect the power.
So he was complaining also that he spent a lot of money on the front speakers and rear speakers, Audio Frog, of course. He didn't get that quality sound, and he think that was the speakers.
He actually thought that the Harman Kardon system sounded better.
Right, and I'm like, no, because he's missing the DSP.
His confusion about DSPs, like most, is he thought DSP was just to do like time alignment and stuff like that. And I was like, dude, if you don't want time alignment, you don't have to have time alignment. DSP does more. In this case, you really want the DSP for the crossovers and the EQ and the volume adjust and all that other stuff. We're gonna do time delay, but we're gonna do it subtly, and we can always go in and turn it off if he doesn't like the way it sounds. But getting back to the battery.
So it seems okay, but not really. I feel that this is too long.
Yeah,
they can actually mount the fuse right here, and you don't have to go.
You don't have to have this extra wire pretzel?
Like a 12 inches.
Yeah, why do we have that?
Yeah.
The other question I have is that's a 4 gauge. Is that the only fuse holder?
That's the only fuse holder, so right now we're running 4 gauge for 3 amplifiers.
Which isn't crazy, depending on what the power draw is of the 3 amplifiers. So once we get those 3 amplifiers out, we'll do some math and figure out what the amperage draws of the amplifiers, the length of the wire that we used, and we'll find out if 4 gauge is adequate or if we need to go to maybe 2 4 gauges or all the way up to a 0 gauge. I mean, I'm thinking we're going to need at least a 0 gauge, possibly 2 4 gauges, depending on where the amplifiers end up.
All right.
Either way, I don't think 1 is enough. Anytime you start one of these projects though, first step is to always remove the fuse holder and tighten the battery back up. Key, tighten the battery back up because you may be turning on and off the car a couple times. You don't want this terminal to be loose. With the power disconnected, we have 2 tasks that we're both going to tackle. Fernando's going to get this driver's door off, get the dash cover off, and one of the passenger doors, so we need to get the doors off the car. Supposedly they've already sound treated the cars, but there's no fast rings. The other thing too is they mounted the mid-range in the door. He wants the mid-range in the dash. He wants the tweeter that's in the dash mounted into the door. That means we're going to be making some new brackets, if they even made brackets. We have to get this apart and figure out what's going on. Anytime we do one of these, we're going to pull every piece of the vehicle apart. All the floor rails, the dash, everything. The one nice thing is that it already has an amp Pro. That means there shouldn't be too much cutting done anywhere. We are going to add in the Tosh link to the amp Pro so that we can go into the DSP we're using. For that, we're going to be using the audio control DM810. 10. So we're gonna Tosh link out of the radio into the processor and then RCAs out to the amplifiers. Which brings us to the next thing. I'm gonna start getting the back apart where the amplifiers are and start removing all that. But before we do that, we wanna pull this back seat out because we're gonna be back there a long time and I don't really wanna mess up anything on the seat. So this is one of those things that just kind of I look at and I question, like, how did this happen? Was it an afterthought? So here's the sub wire. It's on the outside of this. There's the red power wire. It went behind it. How did this get like this? It just kind of doesn't make sense. When you pull this up, which this corner isn't attached down, but as you pull it up, this is stuck on the inside. There's these little teeth right here. The bass knob got stuck into this. This leads me to believe that I feel like the bass knob was forgotten and they just threw it in real quick, which kind of makes sense because this is the bass knob and it's just Velcroed in place. I want to get this hole back off, but first let's take a look at this. Here we go. So we have two distribution blocks with the 4 gauge feeding it and then 2 8 gauge and a 4 gauge coming out. Maybe these are small enough to handle it. We have some fuses here. This one is a 50 amp draw. This one has 325 amp fuses, so that's 75, so we're 125 amps of current draw. Oh, and then this one doesn't have any fuses at all, so it's not drawing any current. That would explain the single 4 gauge. You only had these 2 amps to worry about, right? Am I right? Am I right? Over here we have the ground distribution, so essentially we have 2 distribution blocks, which would be fine if this had fuses on it. This one doesn't have fuses on it, which means that that could screw these 2 amplifiers and cause issues. If the 3 amplifiers stay in place, we will be switching this out for fuse distribution, not just distribution. What I really need to do is just start unscrewing this and getting it off. If you ever wonder why we recommend running ferrules, this is a prime example of why. This was screwed into here, and that screw down, this style here, it ate up all but those little pieces of wire right there. That's it. No matter how awesome this wire was that you ran, it totally shredded it when it got screwed down. Or in the case of this wire, pushed it in so far, he just screwed down into the sheeting itself. We're gonna be disconnecting this, whatever this goes to, we're gonna cut it. We're not worried about polarity, plus we're gonna be pulling all the speakers out. I need to worry about whether the speakers are correct or not at this moment. But what I would like to see is what this amplifier was powering. According to the dip switches here, it is on high pass. This will go up to 5K. It's kind of nice. It's in 2-channel input mode, which is this guy here. Okay, so this is what's weird. This amp could, on this particular channel, could actually do a bandpass, it looks like, but the bandpass is off. Find out what this is powering. So this would have been 3 and 4. What is that?
2.5.
Rear channel on this is the 2.5, which totally needed a bandpass. And for those of you that are going, what is he talking about, bandpass? Bandpass means that there's a low pass filter and a high pass filter. So you want the mid-range to play between those frequencies of the mid-bass and the tweeter. You need to limit its performance between those two. And having a high and low pass crossover will give you that. I'm assuming that these next 2 should be the tweeters.
Yeah.
This one also, channel 1 also has the ability to do a bandpass. It is on high pass, so that's good. The wire that they used is oxygen-free copper. It's Stinger. 4 gauge piece here is actually T-Spec from Metra. It is marine grade wire according to the sleeving. We have 2 different style RCAs going on here. Thinking one is just a short run, so we have one oddball here. The ground 8 gauge is Stinger. When you pull wires out of the amplifier and you unscrew these screws, do yourself a favor, screw them back in nice and tight before you start moving them around. Nothing sucks worse than get to the end of the installation and go to screw your wires in and the screw down has fallen out and is missing because you didn't do this one step. This is weird. We have, on here they used all zip ties with screw holes. These 2 are the reusable kind, these little things. All right, this piece of ground wire is Stinger. The only 4 speakers we have left are the mid bass and the bottom of the door, which this is, and then the rear doors. Looking at the amplifier here, they just had it running high pass. They didn't have a band pass on it either. There again, this needs a band pass because you want it how low it's going to play down, meaning to not interfere with the subwoofer and or blow the speaker, and how high it's going to play up so it doesn't interfere with the mid-range. These amplifiers can do it. They just didn't use it. It doesn't make any sense unless they just didn't know what they were doing. It looks like they get this panel off. It's just this one screw right here. Cut the carpet, but the board sat on top of the carpet, which doesn't make any sense because they could have gone in deeper with it. They left this. There's another one right here. I still don't understand why they cut this if they didn't use that space. And they didn't rub this stuff in very well. Huge gap. Like, if you don't rub this stuff in, it just peels right off. And I could peel it all off. We got a whole mess of RCAs right here that are, this is weird. It's like stuck behind this panel. Let me get this bolt out. So the remote turn on was wrapped around this bottom clip along with the RCAs because they're not properly fastened into the car. Here's what I don't understand about when people bundle up wires like this. This remote turn on bundled up inside here. Why? It's a single wire that is cut on the other end. There's no reason to have it looped in with this RCA. It doesn't serve any purpose. And here's the fun part. Here's a butt connector on the wire because it wasn't long enough. Are you kidding me? It was, we got another, dude, I got another 5 feet of wire right here. How freaking lazy are you? So you ran the ground wire up where the factory harness, look at this. So they ran the ground wire here up into the factory wiring harness area, but they tucked the RCA into this, and then it comes into here, it wrapped all up through here, was bundled up behind here. Yeah, let's keep going. Here's the ground. Why is it here? You could have gone here, drilled a hole, put a bolt on it, but you went into this. I'm sure you thought that going into this because it's 2 pieces of metal that's better, but you're attached to a piece of metal that's tacked into this piece of metal. You don't know how clean that metal is between. Oh my God. Grounds are very important, people. This is not a good one. And they taped up the wire for what you can see. Not the whole wire, just the part that you can see. So that this doesn't corrode and rust, I'm gonna put some treatment on the bottom now before we forget to do it later. Clean the area on the top, rub it in nice and tight, clean off the bottom. I don't know how long these RCAs are, but I'm not gonna reuse them because they're way too long for what we're trying to do. Here's the deal. This isn't the worst install we've seen come in here. As you guys know, we've seen a lot worse. This is an example of just sloppy work. I don't know if they were rushed, which I know they weren't because they had the car for like a week. They may have had other work to do. I don't know. Everything about this is just sloppy. And sloppy ends up like this. When you're doing an install, you want to set yourself up for as much success as possible. When you do a crappy job running wires, well, when you have noise and things don't work right, you know, it's probably that. Taking an extra hour in the whole time of this installation would have made this a much better install, but they didn't do that. As I'm talking to you, I'm looking over here. Let me show you what I'm looking at. So here's the power wire. There again, they taped up what you could see and not what is actually needing the tape. The whole purpose of the tape, this is not for visual. You can see that. That's perfectly safe. You tape up the wire so when it goes behind the panel, just like the factory is here, it doesn't get rubbed on, it doesn't get cut, and it doesn't get damaged. This is what this is for. This is not for beauty. Who wants to see some crappy taped wires? You do it for the protection of the wire, not for pretty. You need to keep the wires safe. For all you guys that are just taping like the last 6 inches of wire, stop doing it. Stop wasting the tape. Save the tape trees, okay? Tape either the whole wire or don't waste your time doing it because you're doing absolutely nothing. No one is looking at you saying, dude, he's so cool. He put some tape on the wire. Nobody. The factory tapes up their wire. You tape up your wire. That's it. That's all it's there for. As I'm taking everything out, I create different piles. Wire goes into one pile. Screws and trash go into another. distribution blocks or parts that I'm gonna keep go into one pile. Now that this is all out, I'm gonna clean all this up. Trash, he gets back, we may reuse, and then put the panels away so they're safe until we're done. Put the amplifiers over on the bench so we can figure out how this is all gonna go. Start pulling the rest of these wires and whatnot. Let's enjoy Fernando getting these door panels off, seeing what is going on with them.
Now it's time to take the door panel out, and the handle we have looks like it's one screw here, so we're gonna grab our panel, 10mm, and behind the older handle it's another plastic cover. It's a 210mm also, and then I don't see nothing else. We're gonna go look, grab our favorite plastic panel and start from the bottom. Now you can see it's almost coming out, so that means there's no screws in the bottom. And there we go.
Door panels off.
Door panels off.
What are we looking at?
Of course they do the roadkill. You know, seems like it's not.
Just like the back, it's not really rubbed in all that well.
Correct. If you're gonna service this door, it's gonna be super hard. They're gonna cut all of it.
Whoever's
Roadkill on
got-
top of the wiring. Not a good idea.
That's gonna suck. We have the mid-range here. It's got little washers to space it out a little bit. While he's getting that out, let's take a look at the door panel here. This is the opening for that. It's rather small compared to the size of the speaker, and with how spaced out that was, I wonder if it was actually hitting. We're gonna relocate the tweeter to here. There's a lot more room. It'll fit better. And because we're going full active, we're gonna have volume control for each speaker. So if this is a little bright, we can tone it down. If it's not bright enough, we can turn it up.
Got the door speaker out. They use the connector right here.
Good for them. These are the Audio Frog GS 690s rubber washers.
Rubber washer.
It must be
It's
so it
not.
doesn't rattle.
But it's not doing nothing.
I know it's not doing anything. It looks like they used a connector, but then cut it off with butt connectors behind it.
Right here.
Okay. This is the Audio Frog GS25. How does it look inside the door?
We got nothing. Just
Is that the
use
only
one
piece? How far
That's
does it go in?
That's it.
Oh, that's, yeah, because I mean, I
That's
can
what
see
we
the
have.
white below your arm
Yeah.
there. If I was to guess, whatever they did here, or whatever scrap they had left over, they just stuck it in the door.
I say yes. I'm guessing all the purpose of doing roadkill is to actually do it in the bottom.
Well, it's solid right there. Sound treatment looks about the same. We've seen everything so far. It's just kind of laying on the door. Here's my thought. Maybe we don't rub it in, because if it ever needs to be serviced, if we leave it like this, it'll be way easier to service. I think we might be doing a disservice by rubbing it in. If we rub it in and someone needs to change this part right here, that's really gonna suck. We have the GS 693s in the rear. Nice three-way Audio Frog 6x9. Got some on the plug.
Yeah, man. Why not? They're rattling.
And just like all the other doors, we have one little piece here. That's it. Now off camera and remove these two doors, and they look identical. Little pieces here, little pieces there. Nothing to get excited about as far as that's concerned. The last piece we need to pull out is the tweeter in the dash. There. Use the wiring just like in the door over here. It didn't have the right end on it, so they just cut it off and T-tapped it in to the factory wiring. But hey, they didn't cut the plug.
It's a T.
Yeah, it's a T. It's the total T. And they did have to make brackets.
I don't know how they make the bracket.
They cut it with tin snips.
Well, he's pretty good.
It looks like they traced it on with a marker, and then they cut it with tin snips. And they used 16th inch ABS.
All right.
And they made the hole just a little bit too small, so you can see how it bows. Then they put some epoxy to hold the tweeter in place. Spectacular. All the speakers are out. The wiring is disconnected. For those of you that aren't aware, the amplifier on this is underneath the passenger seat. On this being a 2020, right now they do not make a T-harness for this to retain the factory harness. It is cut, and it is cut way too close to the plug for my liking. You got more pretty tape, although at least they taped it up so you didn't see it underneath the seat, which is cool. The sad part right here is these big red butt connectors right here, they cut the harness. You don't do it this close to the harness. This sucks. We have one thing still to remove, and that is the radio to get to the Amp Pro. We are going to be pulling that out. For one, we need to disconnect those RCAs, and two, we're going to be installing the Toshlink module into it. Let's head to the dash. First step to get the radio off is to remove this little rubber pocket sleeve from up here. There's two 7mm that need to come out. And this just unclips. At the top, you want to unplug the cigarette lighter, power port, I guess is what it's called now. Behind the radio, those 4 more plugs that need to be removed. These 2 here on the radio itself, 1 on the air conditioning panel, and 1 down here on the little switch panel. This is the radio. There's 4 screws holding that in place. Pulling this out, here's the T-harness for the Amp Pro, plugged into the back of the radio, plugged in here. It has this new speaker loop here. Depending on whether you have the Harman Kardon system or not, this one has it, so it needs to be plugged in. But it looks like the brain box is fallen in the dash. See if you can get it from underneath there.
Oh, I'll find it. Oh.
Yeah, can you unplug it from there?
Yeah.
Okay. It's just hanging loose up underneath the knee buster on the driver's side. I actually like it there as opposed to behind the radio. That way, if you ever have to service it, it's simple and easy to unplug. You don't have to pull this whole radio out. The problem is that it's just hanging there like this, just gonna rattle around. What we have to do is make a mount that it can get firmly mounted to, and then if we need to service it, all we have to do is remove just the knee buster and it'll be right there, easy to get at. Now that we know that, I can get this all put back together. Since the DM1008 doesn't have an external fuse on it, we need to know how much amperage it draws to figure out if the single 4-gauge wire is going to be enough. I've gone to DD Audio's website, selected that amplifier. Maximum current draw is 90 amps, so this draws 90. That means with the 125 we already have, we're at 215. We're at 215 amps of current draw over a single 4-gauge that is about 16, 17 feet long. So I've pulled up a power wire calculator. 200, 250, come over here, come down. It's only good for about 4 to 7 feet of 4-gauge. We clearly have more than that. Followed it across. We're between 16 and 19 feet. That means we're gonna need to go with a 0-gauge. If we put both of the small amplifiers on one channel, we said that was 125 amps of current draw. That puts us in the 10 to 13 feet. So we might be better off trying to figure out a way to mount all 3 of them in the same case and just run a single 0-gauge. With the radio taken care of and the Amp Pro squared away, that just leaves us with a list of amendments, as it were, on what we need to change from what we couldn't see. And it's not that long of a list. We have 0-gauge instead of 4-gauge. We have a fuse distribution block we're gonna need. We need to find out whether we want to do some more roadkill in the doors. We were already doing fastering. That's not a big deal there. Anything else you can think of? No? I'm gonna go call the customer and find out what he wants to change, and then we'll see where we go from there.
I'm going to figure it out how to mount the fuse holder in here. We're gonna use his fuse. So this one was all the way down with the long wire. I'm gonna make a bracket right here. My first thought was grabbing a straight panel all the way down. It's like a factory hole here in the bottom. I can probably go like an L and just go here, but I don't know if somebody's gonna service that and is not gonna see the factory hole with the screw and they might break it. So I'm gonna go with these 2 front bolts. I'm gonna make like a bridge from this corner to this corner, and it's gonna bolt fuse holder mount right there. First thing we're gonna do is measure it from one side to another. 8 3/4, 2 inches, and then the leg 1.5. Now let's go and cut some plastic. Just put a little bit of water so they can cool down faster. That's gonna be the fuse holder right there. We're gonna make new holes here and here. Let's go to the car. This one is gonna be right there. We're on our power wire here. Go that way. I might make a notch right here so they can see the factory bolt from the battery.
we don't have the factory speakers, we have to kind of make do with what we have. This is a template for a Jeep that we do tons of, and we're pretty sure this is the same that is going to go up into the dash, and maybe the same is in the door. We printed one real quick out of MDF just to test fit it. Fits perfect, the notch is where it needs to be. So this is definitely the tweeter mount. Next we have to figure out what goes in this, and I think that's the right length for sure. Fernando's getting the grill off of the door panel right now. That way we can test fit it to see if this lines up. We want to make sure our tweeter sits behind this hole right here. Gotta be up. So our tweeter's sitting kind of low. We'll mark the area where the tweeter should be. The other thing too is that the tweeter sits really far in the door for sure. You might make a spacer to bring it out just a little bit, but we're gonna make this at a 1/4 inch. We're definitely gonna need some form of a fast ring on the tweeter so that it pushes all that sound into the car. But I can tell you just by looking at this and where that other 2.5 was, there was no sound getting into the car. We'll make those adjustments. We'll cut out another one, be all set. To transcribe this into the computer, as far as our marks, we'll scan it in, use a flatbed scanner. Once it's scanned in, we'll launch our software, make a copy of it. We're not doing a Jeep, so we'll delete the Jeep logo, bring in our scan, line it up with our existing, and now we can see where we want our hole to be. We need to know the circumference of the tweeter. They epoxied this in. We're gonna break this off, take the wire off, put the screws back in because we definitely don't want to lose one of those. Input in our new dimensions for tweeter. Make sure we're on center point expansion. Move the tweeter and over. That looks pretty good. This continues on and turns like this. We want to get that tweeter far up to this area here and all behind the grill. Remove that shape, and that will put the tweeter up high and in place. Grab an Audio Frog logo. Conveniently enough, it is already a PNG, which is what we're looking for. We're gonna export this out, drop it into the Glowforge, and see what she looks like. Here's our new piece. Tweeter fits into place. We will be making a strap across the back to lock it in. There's a thread here so we can make a mount for it. That way every time he opens and closes the doors it doesn't move. I'm gonna head over and see if this fits where we want it now. Door panel's back on. Tweeter is up nice and high now. That is going to make sure we get the optimum sound out of here. The next step is to cut the finished product and then make sure that the one for the passenger door is a mirrored image of this one. This one will not fit on that side. Never a dull moment. Let's head back to the laptop. I have my 2 mirrored image pieces here, and I have 2 spacers. Select print. This cut is going to take 20 minutes. Look at that. It still has the paper on it. This is what we're looking at so far. Looking at it a little bit more, as I was talking about, there's a screw hole in the back here. What I might do is cut another one of these out of 1/4 inch and one out of 8 and mount it onto the back. I don't know, I'm still thinking about how I want to do that. Start with that same ring that we were using before, and we'll copy the outside version of it. This will give us our back shape. We need a small hole in the center. That'll be where our screw will go in. And then we need the area where the factory screws go in. If we leave it like this, it will cut this shape out. And with that run on the laser done, that brings all our pieces together. That's the front piece with the Audio Frog logo on it. Next we need a piece of 1/4 inch trim ring. Slide the speaker through. Put it through there. Grab an 1/8 inch. Drop that in place. Grab another 1/4. Drop that in place. The 1/8 inch back piece. And a screw. tighten it up. And there she is. There's our tweeter mount. Our wires will come out of here. This will go into the door. Be right where we want it in the hole. Just like we did on the door, we want to best gauge where that speaker needs to go. So we've taken the grill off of that. This is the same piece we used to test the front, and that seems to be in the center. So when making our hole, we want to go from the center out. That will put that mid-range right below the opening in the grill. We also want to make this one out of 1/8 inch and not 1/4 inch to keep it down. We'll put foam around it to feed it up, but the movement, we don't want it to hit anything in here because it is really tight. So we're just gonna copy one over and change our opening size. Fits just the way we want. That mid-range is in the optimum place to put as much sound as possible through the dash. That means we can do the proof cut now out of 1/8 inch. This one is only going to take 1 minute and 38 seconds. The reason why this is a lot faster is there are no logos. There's no room for logos on these. Press the go button. There's something very satisfying about hitting that button and watching that thing spin across and start doing its lasery things. Pretty cool. For the dash speaker, we want to just mark our holes, then we can drill them. With the holes in place, we'll add the foam to the back of the driver, screw it into place. When screwing in a speaker like this, I like to put my thumb over the surround, protect it. I'm not worried about my thumb so much. There we go, we have a mounted speaker. Now the last thing we want to do to both of these is put some foam around them to help them marriage up with the grills that they're going to be sitting under. That will help this one, because remember, this one's really close. For the tweeter, we are going to remove the grill. And then the tweeter now has its, that'll help it come up into that door panel. This will push all that tweeter sound into the car. Now I just need to build the other two and hand them over to Fernando so that he can get them into the vehicle. One of the problems that we had with the car before we started on it was that the seat, when it slid, it didn't go back all the way because the amplifier is in the way. These amplifiers are way too big for this installation. I would have never sold somebody something like this. Now we have to figure out how we're gonna get them all to go in here and add the DMA10 and still make the seat function. That's proving to be somewhat of a challenge. We've taken all the amplifiers and I've covered them in blue tape. Been playing building blocks with the amplifiers and trying to come up with a plan. We've covered up the outside air vent, this guy right here, so we still have the one in the middle. And how you do that is we cut an 1/8 inch piece of ABS, we put foam on one side as a gasket, and then we use roadkill over that to seal it all in and make it watertight. And that's given us this block of room here, but it's still not really enough room to fit everything. But we have to start somewhere. When deciding on amplifiers, it's very important to figure out where they're gonna go first. You have two different styles of amplifiers. You have amplifiers with a wire that comes out on one end like this, and then you have amplifiers where the wires come out of the opposite ends. That's important to know when choosing amplifiers for your installation. In this case, it's kind of, neither one of them are good. It's just proving to be difficult. I went and cut a big piece of plastic that I just want to get in this area and get it to fit so that I can start trying to manipulate these amplifiers into here and come up with some kind of plan to make this stuff fit. The other thing I have to keep in mind too is that, like, during the center area here, the carpet has to stay there because the seat folds down and you can see that. Lots of fun. I put this panel back on just to give me an idea. Over here. There's a hump here, and there's another one down in the bottom. I've kind of gauged those onto this piece of plastic. What I'm looking at is there's these clip provisions all throughout here, which would make great places to put rivets and screw things down. But we gotta get it fit flush into this first. I'm gonna go grind these off. Fits pretty close. I need to remove some here. We're getting closer. To help me with this, I want to get this panel mounted. To do that, I'm going to add some nut certs into it. I just need to drill some of these holes a little bigger. For those of you unfamiliar with nut certs, what they are is it's like a bolt that gets put into a hole in the piece of metal and will allow us to put a threaded screw in there. It's like a rivet. You put it into the hole and you just squeeze it in. You're done. Now that'll allow us to put this on here. We get it all lined up where we want it. We push. It'll put an indentation of the nut cert into our plastic, which we can then go and drill out. At least have something attached. Thinking if I put the small one over here as far this way as possible, I need to be able to get to my wiring, bigger one here, and then I can put the small down here. I still don't know where I'm gonna put the DM810, but at least I'll have all my amplifiers somewhere, which is a start. Now this is just flopping. What I'll do is I'll build a brace that comes off of here and hold this in through the top, because I have plenty of room to do that. What I'm hoping is that I'll be able to run the power wire up this way and out of the way, and maybe have it come, put the fuse holder somewhere in this area. I don't know yet. Possibly put the fuse holder right here, possibly down here, and build a second piece to hold that in place. Now this little guy, I'm thinking will be able to go here at the base, if I can get it far enough forward. There is this tube right here, but I can just retape that and get that tucked up in there. So we took a pause to put the seat in and figure out where this sits and slide it back. I needed to know where that amplifier needs to be in order for this to have full range of movement. So now I have an idea of what piece of plastic I need to cut for that. I'm thinking I might be able to hover the DM810 here, but I don't know yet. We'll see. So after many trips back and forth to the table saw, measuring, cutting, all that fun stuff, this is what we come up with for the amp rack. The small floor channel is mounted flush up against the back brace. This is raised off the surface an inch. That will allow wires to pass underneath, back and forth cleanly. This amplifier is tucked up in. There's still about an inch behind it. Wires will have to go that way. This is attached here and here. This is a separate attachment. We have the top braces now in. The DSP is located here. The vent is still in place. This is sitting off of the vent so that it can still breathe. It is attached in the bottom here, and of course up here. This area here is going to be for the RCAs to come. As you can see, it's raised. We're going to keep those raised off of the platform into this, so we'll build some more bracing over here. Power wire will stay flat because it's going to lead over into this, which is the fuse holder here, and that will go off this way. On this side of the car, we're going to have our speaker wires come up, and they have to get over to there to Fernando. We'll run them up the side here, across the center because there is a gap there, and into the factory amplifier. Up that side of the car is going to be the 0-gauge power wire, Toshlink cable. This side is going to have the bass knob wire. It is the shorter run because it's on this side of the amplifier. All the RCAs, as I said, are going to just be in this area, so there won't be any of them anywhere near, and the Toshlink is light so it can't pick up any engine noise next to that. Power cable, it's multiple pieces. There's actually 4 pieces here. 1, 2, fuse, DSP. We have to get these all out onto the bench and start wiring these up in a manner that we'll be able to carry them back in here and attach them all in place. It's not going to be easy, that's for sure, but let's give it a go. Everything is out of the car and laid out on the bench. This is kind of the position that I'm going to have to wire this up as. In the car, this is going to sit like this, so I've lined it up with how far over it's going to be. That way I can get my wiring ran. There is a slight gap here in the car. We did that on purpose because there's a factory wire that goes here. That's why this is not attached. We have the power distribution. We have the wire that can run underneath here. Really, we just need to get started on the madness that is going to be wiring all this up. So let's get started. The amp rack is finally finished. This one took a long time. There was a lot of moving pieces, as it were, because like this stuff isn't connected, and there's just so much equipment on here. Routing all these cables and getting everything to length, it took a while, but it's finally done. Now comes the fun part of getting it off of here and into the car. We didn't connect the zero gauge into here. We actually ran that through the car, and we'll connect it in the back because I didn't want to have to carry 10 pounds of zero gauge on this as well. I think this is going to be a two-man job. This one goes behind it. Perfect. The amplifiers are mounted in place. Now we just have to run the left and right wires and ground it. That's why we like to do things on the bench and get all that work done. If I had to sit back here for hours and hours and do this, that would suck. He already ran the zero gauge. When we were taking it apart, we knew running the zero gauge was going to be a struggle for sure, and it didn't disappoint. It's a struggle. We've got it up here behind the panel. The real problem is these things here, they have to snap into place. There's a cover that goes over these, this piece right here. Taking this cover off, getting this all to sit flush in there, and then have that snap back on took a while. That is for sure. Zero gauge is not friendly in this car. Got the front one back on, had to move things around, get them nice and tight in there, but it's all insulated. It snapped back in place. We also have a Tosh cable that's going to come up through here, but because this seat is already unscrewed, plan is to bring it, turn it, go around, come up here, and there's the Amp Pro there, and then we'll have that mounted in place for it to snap into. But sometimes it's these little things like just running the power wire that can take forever. It's right here, so I can attach that into my block. Right now he's running the Tosh link and the remote turn on down that side, and then he can start putting that side of the car back together. And then on this side we just have the bass knob and the speaker wires to run. A little bit easier. Not much, but a little. This is an Amp Pro. And for those of you unfamiliar with what an Amp Pro is, it's not a high level to low level adapter. Let's just get that out of the way right off the top. There's nothing about this, even though it looks like one, it is not a high level to low level. What this is a data to data connection between the factory radio, premium sound system, and this. What this is designed to do is tee in between the factory radio and the amplifier, take that signal that comes from the radio and goes to the amplifier, and bring it into this. That means that you get the signal coming out of the radio, that full range, clean signal goes into this and out through the RCAs. This gives you a 5 volt or 4 volt, there's a dip switch for it here on the back side, output. So you have front, rear, sub, full bandwidth that can go off to your amplifiers. Now what makes the Amp Pro unique is that you can also retain use of the factory amplifier. So for example, if you're just going to add a subwoofer, you can put this in, take the subwoofer out. The advantages of using this over a high level to low level is that full frequency signal coming into this. You don't have to worry about bass roll off, equalization from the factory, nothing. You get a nice clean, just like it was an aftermarket radio, going off to those subwoofers. In this case, we're going to be using this over here, this little knockout. This is for the Tosh link. There's a plus and a minus to using that. The plus is there's no RCAs, meaning we don't have to worry about picking up any noise or anything like that passing between the front of the car and the back of the car, because it's digital. It just light, doesn't pick up noise. The disadvantage to it is sensors. Tosh link is a 2-channel audio. I mean, it's just left, it's just right. This truck has a quadraphonic sensor system, meaning that there's a sensor up front here and in the back here and here. As you're backing up, this will beep, this will beep. When you're up front, this will beep, this will beep. That's going to take those sensors from the left and right channel and just put them all on the left and all on the right. They're not going to beep according to position anymore. So when deciding to do this, it's one of the things you have to consider. Better sound quality, yay, or sensors that stick where they're at. They're still going to be on left and they're still going to be on right. They're just not going to be front and rear. The customer has gone with, I want better sound quality, as we figured he would. That is a separate part called an APA TOS1. Inside the bag is a little tiny part, and the instructions, of course, to do it. It's fairly straightforward. Take the case and pop it from one side. This will come off. These blue connectors will come off if you just lift up a tad. Knock out the blue square here. Open the bag. You'll see this little piece of foam. Remove that, and behind that is a bunch of little eggs. Those are designed to marriage up with this bank here. Line it up in place. and push. Put the blue cover back on, line up your case. Little door on here that the cable will plug into. Now we have digital. There is one more step though. There's a dip switch bank here that we have to select 2-channel audio. Going onto their website and going to the instruction manual for it. Dip switch 1 is the rear chime path. Turn that on. All those rear chimes will be fed into the Toslink right and left output. That way the backup sensors will still function. This is all set and ready to go back in the car. We're gonna make some form of a mount to mount this off in place. The only thing we'll be using is this guy right here, and of course the plugs that plug into here. Let's take a look at the Amp Pro. Fernando got it mounted up in there. He used those 2 factory bolts right there. And of course the Toslink cable, you have to keep it loose. See how it's at that nice bend? You wanna make sure that you keep that bend. Don't put it in a tight bundle. Keep it in like a circle, like the way it comes from the package. Keep it nice and big like that. You want to make sure that light can circle around. If you zip tie it real tight, you'll destroy it. Then you'll have to run a new one, and that would suck.
So now we can apply the fast ring. The first piece is gonna be the back side. What I like to do is roll my window down just to see if it's gonna hit the window when it rolls up and down. Definitely this one is gonna hit. We're gonna cut it. So it's like a 1/2 inch. All right, and that's perfect. The second part of the fast ring is gonna be this, really thin. Careful. Sometimes the second part of the fast ring hits the window too, and this situation is not. This part of the factory plastic hits the speaker, so we're gonna remove it. We already installed the foam on the back of the speaker. The last part of the fast ring is gonna be this one. We're gonna test fit it first. Go outside of the speaker. Now we're gonna install the tweeter.
Fernando's to the point where he's got the tweeter mounted in place. Let's take one final look at it before he puts the grill on. You can see there, the tweeter is gonna come through there perfectly. Added in that foam is going to bring it up nice and into the car.
For the rear speaker is the same process. Test fit the fast ring, then you gotta cut it. I'm gonna prep our wires, so when Dean is finished the amp rack and everything, this is gonna be ready for him. First, what I want to do is cap the wires coming from the amplifier, because the amplifier is still active. We don't want any short, nothing like that. I know the Dean talked about this before. I just want to tell you real quick, if you want to cut the harness, don't cut it too short. Try to go like 2-3 inches. You don't have to cut it so short. We have to disconnect the rear headline speakers and the center console. The next step, that will be polarity test our speakers just to find out which one is positive. For that, we're gonna use the PT9A. For you here, we have the popping sound. So that's red. That we have some wires ready and some labels. For that, I like to use label maker. This is the Rhino 4200, and I'm going to use the 1/4 inch heat shrink. And there we go. What we have left, we have right. Let's go and put it on. are in, all the wires are marked, which is way for the wires.
When we first started taking the amplifiers out of the car, as you recall, I ran a test through them to see what speaker was which amp was doing what, and Fernando had already started taking apart the passenger side of the car and had removed the speakers. We were only able to test the driver's side and the two rears. As it turns out, that kind of sucked, because what we found out later when Fernando was wiring up the amplifier underneath the seat, fixing all those wiring, is that one of the tweeters was blown. Specifically, this guy right here doesn't work. We called up the customer, and he actually had Audio Frog red label him out a tweeter addressed to Dean Frogenstein. Just like that, we're back in business. Now, I know some of you guys out there probably never heard of Audio Frog. Really nice speaker company based out of California. I strongly recommend heading over to the website. Here's the link right here. And check out their product. Another nice thing to do is check out their forums and tech support section. Top notch. Some of the articles that they have in there will blow your mind. A lot of you guys ask about like gain settings and DSPs and stuff like that. Read them. There's a whole section in there just on that. You'll learn a lot. The amplifiers are all connected. We went and put all the fuses in. It does make a rather nice color how that all lined up. Underneath here, we found a nice factory ground point, so we were able to ground all our amplifiers. I knew that going into it. I had checked. There's also a really nice one over here. The side panels are all in. Floor panels are back in place. The last step is getting the wire across here and connecting it up to the factory amplifier wiring over there. And of course, clicking in the bass knob. To get this center console out though, it was surprisingly easy. There's just 6 screws that hold it in. 2 in the back here, 2 in the bottom front, and 2 in the top front, and then this comes out and slides back. It gives us access to put in the bass knob, which Fernando mounted down there. It wasn't easy, and now he's trying to get that thing clipped in, and it's a pain. Fernando's already mounted this, as you guys saw. The last step is putting the ferrule on this and putting it in place. If you get a fuse holder that has a fuse already installed on it, make sure you go and tighten the screws. A lot of the times these will come with fuses in them and they'll be loose. You know, you just don't think, it's like, oh, there's a fuse in there, I don't need to check it. Always check it. If that fuse is loose, what's going to happen is it's going to bounce around inside of there, going to create a lot of heat, and it's going to melt your fuse holder and could possibly start a fire. The power system of this is all connected. Fernando just informed me that the amplifier is all tidied up and put back together. All our wires are connected. You can't even tell. It looks totally factory. Unfortunately, at time of filming, this harness, the T harness, isn't available. It will be, but right now it's not. That looks great.
It's a lot of wire. Done putting the subwoofers together.
We can put the back cover in now. All the gains are accessible with this on. Where we put the DM810, we can get the USB plugged into it fairly easily, so there's no reason to keep this off anymore. All right, we're back in business with this on. Get the seats in, get this all put back together, get the box in, and start debugging the system, make sure everything's doing what it needs to do. Super excited about that. It's that time again. Everything back together, and we're getting ready to set up the DSP. First thing we want to do on the DM810 is look at your input settings. This process is pretty much true for every DSP. Some DSPs have a whole startup section that walks you through this. Audio Control doesn't, so we've kind of made one up. The first thing, we label our channels. In this case, none of these inputs are being used because we're going Toshlink. The only one of these that is being used is 7 and 8. We can go to our output view now. Inputs 1 and 2 are tweeters, and they're going to be fed from 7 and 8. 3 and 4 output is going to be mid, and it's going to be fed from 7 and 8. On the DM810, 7 and 8 is going to be on in every page, just because that's part of testing. On all the other amplifiers, 5 and 6 is on all the time, because that's your Toshlink input, and when they're testing the amplifier, that input always has to be on. 5 and 6 is going to be mid bass. 7 and 8 are going to be rear fill, 9 is going to be subwoofer, and 10 is not going to be used. Doing a quick overview of our inputs, just making sure that everything is fed the way we want it. We're going to drop down arrow here. We're going to select save as, select yes. We're going to write in today's date. It is a white Ram. Memory 1, I like to just label it as the car. We'll go back to our tweeter settings, and we want to add in our tweeter crossover. According to the website, 3.5 mid-range. They said 250. Top will be where the tweeter stops. And mid-bass, we're going to start at 80 hertz on that. The rear, we're going to have at 80 hertz. So everything is kind of tentative right now. We just use 80 hertz as a point of reference for our high pass crossover on our lower mid bass. We just want to make sure we have a crossover in here and it's on. Select save. Once we have that basic taken care of, we can move on to the next step, which is polarity testing to make sure all the speakers move in the directions we want. Is that side good?
Yep.
All greens?
All green.
Greens across the board. Our polarity test turned out great. I hate door chimes. Now moving on to the next step, playing with some laptops and some pink noise. So we have our pink noise playing. I like to show off the subwoofer just to get an idea of what we got going on in the mid-range. This is what we're looking at right now before we get started. There's a hot point right here, low area here, high area here. It's not totally bad, actually. I want to bring this area down some. Not so concerned with this. Now it's just a matter of picking the speakers to change. We want to start with the passenger side first. We have 3 different speakers to work with there, and then we'll come over the driver's side and 3 different speakers there. And then when we're done, hopefully this will look really nice. Because he's got the Fox box with 210s, so we're not really worried about looking at that right now. This is not a 100% sound quality system. He wants it to sound good, but then he also wants the subwoofer to knock the back of his head off. Go figure. I got Fernando inside taking a listen. I've been tweaking it, playing with it. Doing a 3-way set is a lot of work. You have to make sure that you get this side to match that side, no matter what you're doing. Whether you're doing a 2-way or 3-way set, you guys always ask, what are we trying to do? Show me your method. This side has to match that side. As far as the curve and all that goes, well, we have what I think I like. Talking with the customer, we spice it up here and there to get the sound that we're going for. I'm gonna hop in because I want to see what he thinks, see if I got it right for him. God, he's picky. All right, Joe. That was touch. That was up. That one right there. Yeah. That was it. That's what did it for you. Yeah. All right, so let's recap what we had happen here. Where do we start? Well, we can always go back to episode 1 and part 1 and see what we did there. But to recap, we took everything out, we reinstalled it. You know what? Let's hop out and we'll show you what we did, and we'll go over kind of the criteria. First things first, he wanted the mid-range up in the dash. He wanted the tweeter in the door. As we saw, this has that little tiny hole. Tweeter fits in there much better. We get a lot more sound coming out of there, and because we're active, we were able to blend it all together and make it sound really nice. He wanted to make sure that this seat folded into place and that it slid all the way back, which it does now, as you heard that thunk. I will say the box we went with is a little bit more convenient. It's ported on either side. This is the Fox box. If he takes out the floor mat, he can still get to his cool cabinets, which he wanted to do. They're down firing. We have grills on the woofers to keep them safe. If you saw the part where Fernando put the speakers in the box, they didn't have grills on them at the time. They do now to make them nice and secure. Next up, making everything fit back here so it's serviceable. We have access to this side of the amplifier, access to this amplifier. This piece, of course, comes up, which gives us access to plug in the DSP. We can get to the fuse holder down there. And of course, you guys remember the nice mount that Fernando made for the fuse holder underneath the hood. What am I forgetting, Fernando? Well, we actually mounted everything, especially like we made the custom mounts for the speakers. They're just not hacked up and jammed into the hole. We didn't have to use rubber spacers. Well, I think that's it. I think we ticked all the boxes. Yeah. Oh yeah, which reminds me, we disconnected the factory speakers, so it still had these guys up here playing, as well as the center channel, which was really screwing everything up. 911, this one is officially over. Done. Like the way it sounds. I hope he likes it as much as we did. Yep. I want to thank Audio Frog for getting that tweeter out to us.
Really quick.
It's sounding good. Check out Audio Frog at audiofrog.com. You guys know where to find us. Fernando.
On to the next one, guys.
You guys have a wonderful night as always. We'll see you later next time.
Bye.
Oh, that's so scary.
So scary.